Welcome back, first graders. Today we are starting a new domain, okay? And this domain is called Different Lands, Similar Stories. Today's lesson is called Cinderella. Today we are going to discuss the elements of stories, which is something that we've already done in our Fables and Folktales unit. We are going to identify characters, setting, and events in a fairy tale. We are going to demonstrate an understanding of the word worthy. And we're going to use a graphic organizer to retell a fairy tale. Our key vocabulary are embraced, splendor, warning, and worthy. Embraced is a verb. Remember, verbs are our action words. Embraced means hugged or held someone in your arms as a way of expressing love. Ashley and her mom always embraced when she arrived home from school. Our next word is splendor, and it is a noun, okay? And splendor means luxury, great and impressive beauty. The mayor's house was the definition of splendor. It had the most exquisite hand-carved furniture and gorgeous paintings, okay? And if you look at that picture, you got lots of nice cars, and you've got some pillars, and look at the fountains and the arches, and it's just very fancy, okay? Very nice. That's what splendor means. Then we've got warning, and warning is also a noun, and a warning is a statement telling someone about possible trouble, okay? The weather person issued a warning for our town, so we knew to prepare for the tornado. And if you look at that picture, that is a warning sign warning you that there are alligators or crocodiles in the water, okay? They are telling you about possible trouble. Our next word is worthy, and worthy is an adjective. Remember, our adjectives are descriptive words, meaning they are describing something, okay? Worthy means deserving respect, praise, or attention. Devin's good behavior made him worthy of becoming the line leader. So because Devin had good behavior, he deserved to be the line leader. Let's do our core connection in our domain introduction. So fictional stories come from the author's imagination. Remember, authors are the people who are writing the story, okay? So fictional stories coming from the author's imagination, that means that the stories can have elements that are both real or fantasy, meaning there are parts of the story that could really happen, and there are also parts that could not really happen, okay? What do you like the very most about listening to stories? What is your favorite part about listening to stories? Well, people all around the world love listening to and telling stories. In fact, some of the stories told around the world are quite similar to each other. This means parts of the story are the same, even though the stories are from different places around the world, okay? Stories that are similar but have some differences are called versions or variations of one another. You're going to listen to 3 sets of similar stories that originated many, many years ago in different places around the world. Who can remind me what the basic elements of stories are? The basic elements of stories are characters, setting, plot, and conflict. Now, a conflict when we're talking about story elements is the problem that the main character or the most important character in the story are facing, okay? And I want you to listen for how the characters and the settings and the plots and the conflicts are similar or different in the stories that you hear throughout this domain, okay? So today's read aloud originated or came from a country named France many, many years ago. Okay, so I want you to look over here at this map. So this right here, this is North America. Okay, we live on this continent, and we live more specifically in the state of North Carolina, which is right about here somewhere. Okay, now over here, this all of these orange ones are part of the continent of Europe, okay? And in Europe is a country called France. And France is this teal one right here. And that's what the little arrow says, France, okay? So today's story first came from France. Remember our key vocabulary, and I want you to raise your hand when you hear those words in our read aloud, okay? So we've got embraced, which means hugged. We've got splendor, which means fancy. We've got warning, which is telling somebody that there could be danger. And we've got worthy, which means you deserve something, okay? Cinderella is a fairy tale. Fairy tales feature members of a royal family, characters with special powers, and or magical transformations or changes. I want you to listen carefully to identify as many story elements in this fairy tale as you can. Characters, setting, plot, and conflict. Once there was a poor girl who was called Cinderella. Cinderella lived with her stepmother and two stepsisters. So Cinderella, her stepmother, and two stepsisters are some of the characters in this story, right? Her stepmother was mean to Cinderella and forced her to do the hardest and dirtiest work in the house. The poor girl had to scour the dishes, or clean them by rubbing very hard, scrub the floors, and wash the clothes, all by herself. When her work was finally done, Cinderella would sit, tired and alone, by the fireplace among the ashes and cinders. That was why they called her Cinderella. Cinderella's stepsisters lived in splendor, which, remember, means that they had the very best of everything. They had soft beds, thick carpets, and silver-edged mirrors. Poor Cinderella had to sleep on the floor, next to the fire. How is Cinderella's life different than her stepsisters? How is the way that they live different? So think about how her stepsisters get to live and think about Cinderella and how is that different? The stepsisters, they get nice things, right? They get to sleep in beds and they get fancy clothes. And it said that they lived in splendor, meaning they had the best of everything, right? And poor Cinderella, she had to do all these chores by herself, and she didn't even get a bed to sleep in. She had to sleep on the floor next to the fire. One day, the king's son, the prince, announced that he was going to hold a royal ball at the royal palace. It would be a grand evening of dancing, and all the young ladies in the kingdom were invited. When they heard the announcement, Cinderella's stepsisters shrieked with excitement. For days they primped in front of their mirrors and talked of nothing but the ball. They shouted orders at Cinderella and ran her ragged while they got ready for the ball. So Cinderella's stepsisters kept her so busy helping them that she had no time to rest. Okay. Cinderella! Shouted the older stepsister. Shine my shoes! Cinderella! Called the younger sister. Iron out this wrinkle in my dress. Cinderella helped her stepsisters get ready without complaining. Silently, however, she was longing to go to the ball. She imagined herself dancing in the arms of the prince. How wonderful it would be! And yet, she knew her stepmother would never allow her to go. At last the time came. The stepsisters and their mother left for the palace. Cinderella watched them drive away. When she lost sight of them, she began to cry. She felt so miserable and alone. What characters have you met so far? So what characters have we met? The stepmother, the two stepsisters, Cinderella, and we've talked about the prince, right? Oh, hang on, I had one more question for you. Two more questions for you. What does Cinderella want to do? What does she want to do? She wants to go to the ball, right? Why can't Cinderella go to the ball? Because her stepmother won't let her. Okay? But Cinderella was not alone after all. She heard a gentle voice ask, "What's the matter, dear?" She looked up and saw a woman with a kind face. I wish I could," began Cinderella, but she could not finish for all her tears and sobbing. "You wish to go to the ball? Is that it?" said the kind woman. "Why, yes," said Cinderella with surprise. "Then it shall be so. Cinderella, you are a kind girl, worthy of going to the ball," said the woman. So Cinderella deserves to go to the ball because she's kind and she's good, right? For you see, the woman was Cinderella's fairy godmother. "Now run into the garden," she said to Cinderella, "and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella went to the garden, puzzled. She picked a large pumpkin and set it on the ground before the kind woman. The fairy godmother tapped it with her magic wand and turned it into a dazzling coach lined with satin. "Now, dear," said the fairy godmother, "bring me the mousetrap from the house." Cinderella brought the trap, which had 6 live mice in it. The fairy godmother released the mice and waved her wand over them, turning them into a fine set of 6 gray horses. Then, with a touch of her wand, she turned a big fat rat into a big, fat, jolly coachman with long, fancy whiskers. "Well," said the fairy godmother with a smile, "what do you think? Are you pleased? Are you ready to go to the ball?" "Oh, yes," said Cinderella. "But must I go in these dirty rags?" Her godmother laughed. Then, with a touch of her wand, she changed Cinderella's tattered clothes into a glittering gown of gold, and on her feet appeared a pair of glass slippers, the prettiest in the world. Okay. Cinderella stepped into the coach, but before she left, her fairy godmother gave her a stern warning. There's a vocabulary word. "Do not stay at the ball after midnight, not even a moment. When the clock strikes 12, the coach will once again be a pumpkin, the horses mice, the coachman a rat, and your gown the same clothes you had on." So remember, a stern warning is a serious set of directions that you should follow. What was the warning that the fairy godmother gave to Cinderella? What was the warning she gave? She said to make sure that she was not at the ball after midnight. Cinderella promised she would leave before midnight. Then, calling out her thanks, she rode away in the coach, feeling happier than she had ever felt before. When Cinderella arrived at the ball, everyone admired her beauty. The prince asked Cinderella to dance with him. They danced together once, then twice, then again and again. Cinderella's face shone with happiness. Everyone at the ball looked on in admiration. Everyone, that is, but the 2 stepsisters. They glared jealously at the lovely lady, though they had no idea who they were glaring at, that they were glaring at Cinderella because they didn't recognize her in her beautiful gown. For Cinderella, the music, the dancing, the warm gaze of the prince all seemed a wonderful dream. How quickly time slips away when the heart is happy. As Cinderella began to dance again with the prince, she heard the palace clock begin to toll. "Oh my!" she gasped. "What time is it?" "Midnight," said the prince. So, what is supposed to happen at midnight? Who remembers what's supposed to happen at midnight? Everything Cinderella's fairy godmother gave her is going to turn back into what it really is, right? The coach is going to become a pumpkin, the horses are going to become mice, and the coachman's going to become a rat, and then Cinderella's gown is going to turn back into the rags that she had on before the godmother used her magic, right? Midnight, Cinderella's cheeks grew pale. She turned and, fast as a deer, ran out of the ballroom. She sprinted down a long hallway, then down a staircase. At the foot of the stairs, she stumbled. One of her slippers fell off. But Cinderella could not stop. As she ran breathlessly out of the castle into the darkness, she heard the clock strike midnight and felt her smooth gown turn into the rough cloth of her everyday clothes. Her dazzling coach had been turned back into a pumpkin, so she ran home alone. When she got there, she realized that she was still wearing one glass slipper. When Cinderella had run away, the prince had raced after her. Although he did not catch her, he did find, part way down the staircase, the glass slipper that had fallen off of her foot. And that is why, the very next morning, the sound of trumpets woke the kingdom. The prince announced that he would marry the woman whose foot fit the glass slipper. He sent his men out on a mission. They were to try the slipper on the foot of every maiden in the land. So why did the prince want his men to find the woman whose foot fit the glass slipper? Why do you think? Probably so that he could find the woman who was wearing the glass slipper, right? From house to house they went, trying the slipper on foot after foot. On one foot, the slipper was too long, on another, too short. And so it went until they came to the house of Cinderella and her stepsisters. Cinderella's stepsisters tried to fit their feet into the slipper. They squeezed, pinched, and pushed, but the slipper would not fit. Then, from the shadows, Cinderella stepped forth and said, "Let me see if it will fit me." "You?" cried the stepsisters. "That's ridiculous." Remember, the stepsisters did not recognize Cinderella at the ball, and thus did not know that she was there. Every young woman in the kingdom is supposed to try on the slipper. That includes me, stated Cinderella. The prince's men agreed, as the prince had given strict instructions that every maiden in the kingdom was to try on the slipper. One of the men placed the slipper on Cinderella's foot, and it fit perfectly. The stepsisters' mouths dropped open in astonishment. They were even more shocked when, from her pocket, Cinderella drew forth the other glass slipper. Only then did the stepsisters understand. The beautiful lady they had seen at the ball was Cinderella. They threw themselves at her feet and begged for forgiveness. Cinderella was so kind-hearted that she forgave them and embraced or hugged them. Cinderella married the prince. Her stepmother and stepsisters were invited to live at the palace with her, and she and the prince lived happily ever after. The end. Okay, guys, we are going to start our comprehension questions and our word work. If you need to get up and do a little wiggle or go for a quick walk or get a quick snack, please go ahead and do that and then come right back. All right. Who is the main character in this story? The main character. Cinderella. How did she get her name? Cinderella got her name because she would sit by the cinders and ashes of the fire after a hard day's work, so she would get covered in all of the cinders. Who appears to help Cinderella go to the ball? Cinderella's fairy godmother appears to help her. What does the fairy godmother do with the pumpkin, the mice, and the rats? She turns the pumpkin into a coach, the mice into horses, and the rat into a coachman, right? Now, what warning did her fairy godmother give her? Her fairy godmother warned Cinderella to leave the ball before the stroke of midnight, as everything will change to be as it was before, right? Now, what happens at the stroke of midnight? Cinderella runs out of the castle as her gown transforms back into the rags. The coach becomes the pumpkin, and the horses become the mice again, and the coachman becomes the rat again, right? What does Cinderella lose as she is running out of the castle? Her glass slipper. And how does the prince find Cinderella? The prince sends his men to have every woman in the land try on the glass slipper. And Cinderella tries on the glass slipper and it fits perfectly, right? Now, how did the stepsisters act when they found out that Cinderella was going to marry the prince? What do? They begged for forgiveness, right? Now, what parts of this fairy tale could never really happen? So, what parts are things that couldn't ever happen in real life? A pumpkin could not be turned into a coach, and animals could not be turned into people or other animals, right? Now, how might the story have been different if Cinderella's stepmother was nice and Cinderella didn't have to do the hardest, dirtiest work? How do you think the story might have been different? There's no right or wrong answer for this one. It's just kind of whatever you think. Okay. All right. So in the read aloud, you heard the fairy godmother say to Cinderella, "Then it shall be so, Cinderella. You are a kind girl, worthy of going to the ball." I want you to say the word worthy with me, okay? Worthy. Worthy means deserving respect and praise or attention. The two brothers were very talented and worthy of the awards they received. What is something nice that you have done for someone else? When we do nice things for other people, we are worthy of love and respect. I want you to think of a time that you were worthy of something, and I want you to tell about it, okay? So pause the video and go tell somebody about a time that you were worthy of something. What's the word we've been talking about? Worthy. Okay. All right. So today we talked about the elements of the stories, right? We talked about the characters and the setting and the plot and the conflict, right? Oh, there go my lights. We identified each of those in this fairy tale. We were able to use and understand the word worthy. And in a minute, you're going to use a graphic organizer to retell the fairy tale of Cinderella. Okay? I can't wait to see your work. Thanks for listening.